Welcome to the Trader, a Spotify Top 10 Traitors podcast. I'm Matthew, a writer working in unscripted TV development, and I am a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series, The Traitors. The Trader features deep dives into every episode of the show, as well as interviews with contestants. And this season of the podcast is dedicated to season 2 of The Traitors US. This is also a special one-off magical bonus edition of the podcast. As I recently reported in my TT News segment, on the 26th of February, there was a screening of episode 9 of The Traitors US at the New York City venue 92NY, at which Alan Cumming, the host of the TV show, of course, was present for a Q&A session. And I put out a semi-serious call for a trader correspondent to go to the event on my behalf and report back on everything that went on there. And I was so lucky to have my call answered by Savannah Missick, New York resident and faithful trader listener who offered to be that correspondent. And Savannah is here to give us a rundown of the standout moments from the event. Savannah, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be so surreal listening to this back when it pops up in my feed.
Excellent. And before we even get to the event, tell us a little bit more about you and about your history with the Traitors. When did you start watching the show?
Sure. I'm a recent graduate from Fordham University here in New York. I majored in film and television with a concentration in television. As my professors will tell you, I really had a sub-concentration in reality television, as that's what I wrote the majority of my papers on. And it sort of goes into how I found the Traitors. I've been a lifelong fan of Big Brother. I love Survivor. And so I had heard right when it got announced, a year before the show even aired, that Suri, who's one of my favorite Survivor players, Rachel Riley, who's one of my favorite Big Brother players,
Yeah.
and a couple of other people I really enjoyed watching were going to be on this show. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's like Mafia and Suri will be there and Rachel will be there. Okay, say less. And then promptly forgot about the whole thing since it had come out a year prior, the announcement. And then as sort of Christmas began to wind on, I began to hear out of the UK this show called The Traitors was getting really big. And I was like, I got to figure out a way to watch that. And then I was like, wait, there's going to be the US version with Suri and Rachel and all these people I love. So I was so excited to watch it. The day it came out, I was actually home for Christmas break from school. And me and my mom started watching it. And we are not bingers. We are not binge watchers at all. We finished the whole thing in 3 days, which is a big thing for my mom and I. And we just could not get enough of it. Anytime my dad would come in, he'd be like, hey, what are you doing? We'd be like, shh, Traitors are on, Traitors. And he just got the hint that this was something we were super into. When I got back to school, my roommates who love reality TV, I was like, you guys, we got to watch this. So I rewatched the whole thing probably a week later. I think we finished also in 3 days.
Yeah.
I found it pretty early and then brought it to everybody I know and was like, you have to watch this.
Yeah. And have you now seen the UK version and any other versions from different countries?
Yes. As soon as they became, let's say, as soon as they became watchable here
Sure.
through legal means, we started watching Traitors Australia season 1, which, wow, what a season that was. And your
Yes.
coverage was amazing, Matthew. I loved all the interviews. They just added so much to what we saw on TV. And then we finished with UK season 1. Really enjoyed that as well. And then we watched Australia season 2 sort of as it was airing. That was I needed your recaps to really get me through that to be like, are we we're really seeing this? And then I've seen a couple episodes of New Zealand. I think that's the one we're going to tackle next as
Yeah.
a group. You
Okay.
know, our Thursday nights will be empty here shortly, so I'm sure we'll be replacing it very soon.
Yes, that's a good replacement. And yeah, Australia season 2 is wild. And genuinely every day I have notifications from people leaving comments on YouTube, just like minds being blown at the things that happen in that season. I love it so much because it is so nuts. So, Savannah, you went to the event in New York. You were watching episode 9 of The Traitors. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Take us on a journey. The floor is yours. Tell us all about your experience at the screening then.
Sure. So the atmosphere was really great. I think it was a very different audience than that venue typically tends to pull in. It was really fun. Everyone was sort of dressed up for the occasion. You saw a lot of headbands, which, as someone who really loves Parvati, I really approve of. That was really funny. The person next to me was also there by themselves, so I was talking to them, and the first thing I said was, "So, how about these headbands, huh?" And the person goes, "What are you talking about?" And we look around. I think I counted 9 headbands. It was absolutely crazy.
Excellent.
And yeah, they had a person come out and sort of introduce the show as if anyone really needed an introduction to the show. And then we rewatched episode 9. It was very fun. I think most of the people in there had clearly already seen it, so they kind of knew
Yeah,
when the big moments were coming.
sure.
So it was really fun laughing at the campness of Phaedra talking to Kate in the dungeon. And it feels scripted, but it's not, but it is. Maybe Parvati was onto something about housewives being actors. I don't know. Um, and so that was really fun. The crossbow challenge felt even longer the second time around,
Yeah, I bet.
knowing sort of all the stuff that was coming through with that, and knowing like, oh, I really only have to pay attention to the part where Phaedra switches from CT to Trishelle.
Yeah, right.
But we made it through. The audience really seemed to love John. Anytime John appeared on screen and did something
Okay.
stupid, not in like a fan favorite sort of way, but in a like, let's laugh at John. There's one scene at breakfast where he scoots his chair out, and it's maybe a half second. And it's the audience thought it was one of the funniest things of the whole night.
Okay,
So
wow.
that was a real surprise.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so we finished the episode, of course, Phaedra's line, "This isn't The Bachelor, I don't have to kiss your ass for a rose." Got the biggest response of the night, as you could probably predict.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Um, and then we had a brief intermission while they set up, and Alan was interviewed. He came out with Catherine Cohen, who interviewed him. She's a performer at Club Cumming, his club, so they had a very easy repartee, and she was obviously watching the show, so it was really fun. Her asking like personal questions, like that she had about the show, and then
Yeah.
they did audience questions as well. So Alan had a lot of really fun behind the scenes things and things like his input on the show. So I can kind of go through some of them. I have them in like a convenient list here.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, One of the first things he said is that he's as obsessed with the show as we all are, and he needs to know what happens nearly as much as we do. He said he doesn't go to sleep until the producers call and tell him who has been murdered
Oh,
because he
wow.
needs to know before he sleeps, which
Okay.
I think is hilarious.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the whole audience just ate everything Alan set up. I mean, he was really funny.
Yeah.
Um, One of the first sort of, I have this sort of in order of like the episodes, but they film one pass of the traitor selection when Alan walks around the table. They have one pass that Alan taps everybody. So they have a nice camera angle
Ah,
just in
okay.
case.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't thought about that because, you see it looks perfect. And how would they know that, if they're moving things around? But that makes a lot of sense that they just get everybody.
Sure.
And with that, Alan was really stressed trying to tap Phaedra because Johnny Bananas was actually leaning into her shoulder. And so he had to get around him to reach her and make sure that only Phaedra knew what was happening.
Okay.
He said that he was incredibly anxious and he was dreading having to do it. So that was really fun.
Do you think that's
There
why they murdered Johnny so soon? Because they were worried he felt the shoulder tap?
Maybe. I mean, to be honest, that's not the only coat rustling, shoulder tapping situation that caused someone to get out. I mean, with Larsa,
Mm.
and Alan said that he thought that was delicious. That whole section where immediately he does it on purpose. He said he walks backwards, he walks forwards, he purposely, moves around with his jacket, and he was
Yeah.
so delighted that Larsa actually took the bait.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, Dan obviously wanted to get out someone strong first, but I do like to believe your theory, Matthew, that maybe there was something to Phaedra was like,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
I'm just gonna run with that. I wasn't even there and I'm gonna take that forward.
Yeah, I think we have to accept that as canon now. There is a whole section devoted to Alan's style and the outfits he wears, especially in the US. That is a big part of it. I mean, we love Claudia. We love her insane sweaters, and I see the style in season 2 has leveled up even more.
Yes, yes.
But Alan's fashion really is one of the high points of the series.
Sure.
So he said this season they tried to match his outfits to the challenges, both
Okay.
thematically. He didn't really go into it, but I thought that was really interesting. And then in season 1, they were just sort of, in his words, zhuzhed up versions of his own outfits that he had. The vibe was, quote, dandy Scottish laird, which I really love.
That's my mantra every day when I look in the wardrobe. So yeah.
Yeah, same. I definitely have all of that in my wardrobe for sure. And yeah, and he loves that that's sort of become this whole immersive world. And that style is such an important part. And even for season three, he's actually had designers approach him about designing
Oh,
things.
okay, cool.
So
So
I guess get hype for season three for sure.
yeah, they're planning ahead. I mean, we knew it's been a recommission, but yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like it's sort of all go planning already. That's cool.
Yeah. And Alan said that he finds the show interesting because he thinks it's fascinating watching people being forced to lie and having to deal with the psychological effects of being forced to lie.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I feel like that is sort of the thing, especially, in other series where it is like quote unquote normal people. Watching normal people be like, oh, I am the villain now. What do I do with that? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the besides the format and the setting. When the Traitors started, that was the first thing I would say to people is watch the show just for the psychological, analysis that you will come away from it with. So I'm glad
Yeah.
Alan is feeling the same way.
Yeah, and I know that's like what I love about Survivor and Big Brother. I love watching people lie to each other. I love seeing what makes a good liar and what doesn't,
Yeah.
especially having a background in theater. I think it's fascinating watching people what they do with their hands when they lie.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I love seeing how people's body language changes and all that. So yeah, definitely I'm with Alan on this one. The psychological stuff is the most fascinating. Like yeah, it's fun to be camp and wear cloaks and stuff, but it's like really like what's underneath all that. What other things? Oh, this is a fun one. Alan occasionally struggles to keep it together, in terms of keeping himself professional and being very unbiased. He specifically said that if you watch season one of US, in the Fire of Truth at the very end with the stuff with Suri and Quentin and Andy, there's not a lot of Alan in it because he was so shocked that his face betrayed it. And so they couldn't show it because it would totally ruin the
Wow.
atmosphere. So
Yeah.
he was literally off camera with his mouth open, like, oh, and they couldn't use any of it.
Yeah.
So Alan's like, yeah, that's why I'm conspicuously missing from a lot of those shots, which I
I,
thought
I,
was really fun.
I mean, I assume he's talking particularly about Roundtable, like those moments that he must find it difficult.
Yeah, he said this season, like trying to keep it together when everyone was like fighting, like Sandra and Janelle when they're just going back and forth. He said that was really funny and it was hard for him to like keep it together. And anytime Kate speaks, he also thought was quite funny. You can
I
tell,
I'm with him on that.
yeah, honestly, I don't think there's one time she says something and I don't laugh. So honestly, I would have the same problem.
Yeah.
Um, this is sort of interesting. There's a whole section about what Alan does when he goes to the turret, like what that looks like for him on the back end of things, and
Yeah.
he has to stay up late. And sort of one night there was Eurovision in
Oh
season
yeah.
one, so they threw him a little party because he was going to miss it. I thought that was really funny.
Okay. I'm a huge Eurovision fan. Yes, I'm with Alan. I'm with Alan on everything. I've got more in common with Alan than I realized.
Yeah, me too. And then this is just sort of an interesting thing, in terms of the turret. I didn't realize, I mean, I kind of figured, but it was interesting. Alan said the producers talked to the traders in the turret via a god mic. There's not like an actual person in there. They have like
Okay.
a speaker that's like, okay, you need to come in now or whatever, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
As someone who does theater and loves a good god mic where you can't
Yeah.
see who's talking.
That's very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do often wonder what that set really is like, how big it is, how many people are behind the camera at that point. So yeah, that answers a lot. That's really interesting.
Yeah, because I had the same thought of like, okay, so are the cameras mounted on the walls? He didn't really go into that, but I thought it was really interesting, that he said that there's not that many people in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Along with that, in terms of the set, he said that a lot of the castle is actually sort of like just derelict, and they just
Yeah.
use arts and they sort of paper over it. Apparently, there's even a swimming pool
Oh wow,
that they
okay.
haven't used.
Oh,
It's just like an abandoned swimming pool.
it's only a matter of time. I'm telling you, they expand every
Yes.
every season. Season three, that swimming pool is coming. But I'm sort of not surprised that, yeah, parts of it are unused or derelict. That seems fairly common for big stately homes in the UK.
Hmm.
They're so expensive to maintain. So yeah, that kind of checks. Yeah.
Yeah, and Catherine joked that's where Fergus hangs out, which I thought was really,
Yeah,
I love that.
definitely. Poor Fergus.
Yes. She also mentioned as a highlight, and I agree, the night that Parvati poisoned Ekin-Su with the poison chalice. Alan mentioned that the producers let them stay longer in the castle and drink a lot more. And that's kind of obvious, I think, if you look at the way Ekin-Su is behaving specifically.
Yes, yes, that's not
Um,
much of a surprise. Sure.
And then he followed it up with an anecdote when they all came to New York for press. Ekin-Su and a bunch of the others went to Club Cumming, his club, and they were hanging out. And Ekin-Su was loving. She was like, "Alan, I love you. You're so great." And Alan was like, "Well, that's why you got murdered." I really love that. He also told Dan, he was like, "Dan, you have the most votes, and you have been banished."
Nice impression. Well done.
Yeah. And I'm trying to like look through my notes sequentially. Oh, this was kind of funny. Speaking about the round tables and getting vanished or not. John and MJ both talked a lot in the round table.
Okay.
Expected that from John, but not from MJ for sure.
Yeah, we don't see that much of her in the edit.
Yeah. He said that she had, quote, a few flights of fancy, which I was really fascinated by because we don't see her. We see her looking stupid and walking out of rooms backwards, but we never see her going on and on and on.
By flights of fancy, does he mean like sort of wild theories about things or
Yeah, he kind of moved on pretty fast from it, but I guess she just had, yeah, maybe crazy theories that she just kept going on about, and they kind of just had to cut around it, is my
yeah.
guess.
Okay, okay.
But that was really interesting that he said MJ talked a lot more than was shown.
Okay. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. Sort of, I mean, I don't know if MJ gets to the end or not. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But he teased a very, quote, juicy Fire of Truth ceremony at the end.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I can't wait.
And that makes me very anxious for the end of the season. And he said that this whole season has been very juicy and that he has really enjoyed watching it, both there on site. He has in his room, he has access to all the camera feeds.
Oh
So
wow.
he actually said he didn't really leave his room a lot because he would just sit there and watch.
Oh my God.
Very like
Like
Big Brother.
yeah, like literally like Big Brother. Like
Yeah.
he's surveying everything. That's hilarious. This image of him like masterminding everything and just watching everyone.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool to hear that I don't know why, and I think he's a great host, and he's obviously a great actor. I had this preconception that maybe he wasn't that, it's just a job and he shows up and he does his lines and he goes. It's cool to hear that he's really invested in it as well. Like that makes it so much more fun.
Yeah. He was super into it. I think Claudia mentioned she had that screen too, which would make sense because obviously it's the same production company.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think it's really funny that both the hosts of these shows are just like glued to their seats, being like, "Oh my God, what's gonna happen?"
Yeah, because Claudia Winkleman from the UK show has famously, there are interview clips of her saying that when the show was first presented to her, she just was like, "This sounds nuts. I'm not doing this." But then watched the Dutch version and became really fixated. So yeah, it's interesting to hear how much they even on set, it's even being there because sometimes being on set, the magic is not there so much and it's long and slow. But yeah, it's fun to hear that they are just as excited to be part of it as well.
Yeah, Alan said that he when he got the pitch from his like non-scripted agent, which he joked, it's like sounds like the agent just doesn't know what she's doing. Uh, when he first got the pitch, they were like, "Yeah, so it's a murder mystery, and you'll kind of be the host. You'll be like a character." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said that he typically tends to go, if his reaction is what, he tends to do things like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So he, as soon as it kind of came back around to him further in the development process, he got to see the Dutch one, and he was like, "Okay, I get it now. I get
Yeah,
where we're going for here. Let's do it." And
yeah.
he really loves doing it now, which is kind of funny. And he still doesn't watch reality TV, but he really, really likes the Traitors.
Yeah. Well, it's that's good because it sounds like he he's keen enough that he will continue as the host. So it's I like, that sort of continuity through series, the same host sticking with it. So, sounds like he's in it for the long run.
Yeah, and I feel like Alan is just such a vibe. Like he's such a tone setter for the US,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
is Claudia, as is Roger, as is every host. But I feel like Alan specifically, he said it was actually his idea, like when someone gets murdered and he gets the picture down from the wall to toss it, that was his idea.
Yeah.
So I feel like him specifically, even being an executive producer, he has a lot of control over the tone, which I like because the US is so different than the other series,
Yeah. And of course he's an actor, so he has those sort of improvisational skills as well.
for sure.
So yeah, he works perfectly.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing that you may find pretty interesting, other than the last little thing I have, he said that the crossbow challenge in episode 9 was actually supposed to be something else. I couldn't make out exactly what he said. It was one of the other challenges from the UK,
Okay.
but it was raining so hard that they had to move inside.
Ah, yeah.
That's why, because when I was watching it, I was like, why are they doing this in a church? This feels very dangerous.
Yeah.
But that would make a lot of sense.
Exact same thought. I was like, how did they get permission to do this in this
Yes.
church? But yeah, the fact that it was raining in the I know I make this joke all the time in the podcast. The fact that it was raining in the UK is utterly unsurprising. It is literally raining outside my house right
That's so funny.
now. That's so cool. I have questions to ask as well that maybe you have the answers to.
Yeah.
Well, one of them is about the event. One of them is just me asking silly questions about Alan Cumming. Uh, I got the impression that from the website that you could buy like an online ticket. Were you aware of it being like streamed live or people watching online?
They never said anything about it. It seems like the room could have been like wired for that, but they made no mention of it in the actual event.
Okay, cool. And of course, I have to ask, did you get the chance to ask a question?
I did not. They literally, we had little note cards and little pencils. And I guess at some point you were supposed to write your question down. And they literally, the ushers zoomed through the aisles and at one time, and it was it. And by the time I realized what was happening, I couldn't even give my card if I had a question to think of in that moment.
Oh,
So I was very sad. The questions that were asked were very good. They were very fun too. A lot of them were like, one of them was, who would you align with if you were on this season?
mhm.
And Alan actually said CT, which I thought was really interesting.
Okay. I guess CT's sort of quite quiet. Maybe he just blends in and everybody likes him, so that's quite useful.
Yeah, I guess because he said it, he was quiet, he was honest, he was straightforward. And Alan said that that's what he would value in an alliance partner. So
Okay.
fair enough.
Yeah,
That's a good
yeah,
answer, I think.
yeah. Well, even though you didn't get to ask a question, it sounds like Alan was really forthcoming and you found out so much about the
Yeah.
show and behind the scenes. It's funny because, I've interviewed guests from the contestants from the show, and I'm about to interview a UK traitor tomorrow. And they're often told, we can't don't talk about behind the scenes, don't ask. So it's cool that the host of the US show is like, yeah, I'll tell you everything, and it's the opposite thing going on. So it's fun to hear all that stuff that we don't get that much access to usually, I would say.
Yeah. He made a joke. The only thing Peacock told him he couldn't say was that like they want to maintain the illusion that they stayed in the castle.
Yeah, yeah.
Alan promptly broke that about 5 minutes in, and he goes, "Peacock doesn't want me to tell you where we stay." But and then later he referenced it again. He said, "Oh yeah, well when everyone else goes home," and then he paused. He was like, "I mean upstairs."
Yeah, I think for most fans that illusion is was probably broken a while ago, but
Hmm.
it's funny to hear Alan, not trying very hard to keep that rule.
Yeah.
Of course, you live in New York City, is that right?
I do.
Have you been to Club Coming, Alan's Club?
I have not. I would, after hearing about the vibes and sort of seeing the cast go through press there, I think it'd be super fun. I think it's a little wild for me personally. But I would love to go and just check it out, certainly.
Yeah. There was a sort of there was a Showtime like documentary series or like a three-part documentary a couple of years back all about Club Coming. I haven't seen it, but it's sort of just talking about it makes me want to go back and watch that. Have you ever been to Scotland or the UK?
I have not. I have never actually been out of the country, but I would love to go.
Yes, I think the Traitors should inspire you to come
Oh,
to a
yes,
Scottish castle. You'd love it.
for sure. I would also love to stay at the hotel they stayed at in Traders, Australia. That is on my bucket list for sure.
Yes, the Robertson Hotel. I
Yes.
weirdly follow it on social media just to reminisce and the nostalgia and like all of their posts.
Yes, RIP Traders Australia for giving us two
Oh,
of the most insane seasons of television.
it's honestly still too fresh for me. I am holding on to the
Me
dream that
too.
it will eventually come back on a different channel and be revived. I It's my prayer. Savannah, before we finish, is there anything that you want to promote, or can people find you online? Where can we follow you?
Yeah, so I'm most active. I would say I'm not super active, but I'm most active on Twitter, which is just my name at Savannah Missick. When I'm not doing reality TV stuff, I'm actually a women's sports reporter. So that is what I mostly use Twitter for. So basically, the way that my life is structured, reality TV happens in the winter and the spring. Soccer is spring and summer, and then reality TV is my winter. So it really works out for me. But yeah, so you can follow me there. I like to write a lot of really interesting pieces about women's sports, mostly women's soccer or football. And yeah, I actually did a piece not too long ago about women's sports players we'd love to see on Survivor. So who knows? Maybe I can convince my editors to let me do one about the Traitors.
Yes, I'm behind that campaign. Uh, I will put the link to your X account in the episode description. Before you leave, I do have one more question. Who
Yes.
do you predict is going to win this season of Traitors US?
I knew you were going to ask me this, Matthew. I've seen too many episodes of this podcast to not know where you were going with this. Okay, here's my prediction. I think that some combination, I think the Faithful are going to win. I think Sandra's going to win. I think MJ's going to win. And maybe some combination of John and Sheree, possibly CT.
Okay, interesting. Uh, I think I've said this on the podcast. I think I agree with you. I think it will be a faithful win. Don't think Phaedra's going to last much longer. And I mean, she can't possibly get to the end now. Like her numbers up,
For sure.
and I think it all rests on Kate. I think it depends how well is Kate gonna pull off this deception, or is she just going to crumble, or decide again that she doesn't really care that much about being a good liar? What will she get rumbled? But yeah, I agree with you, Savannah. I'm betting on a faithful win. For the listeners, as always, you can keep up with the podcast on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube at the Tradar Podcast or on X at the Tradar Pod. You could even email me at the Tradar Podcast at gmail.com. You can send questions, thoughts on episodes through any of those means. You could leave reviews. You could follow, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, all those places, all those things. Savannah, thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next episode of the show, which is on essentially tonight when we're recording. Interesting. Oh, I have to ask. I do have one more question. Who do you think is gonna get voted out? Who's banished?
Oh, I think Peter's banished for sure.
Okay. Why?
Because okay, I'll give you like my TV answer here. I think that MJ's thing where she says, you know what, it doesn't, I have an open mind. Going into this, I have an open mind. I think that the edit is leading us to believe that she'll betray Phaedra, but I think really she won't do that until maybe next episode. I think that was put there that this is part of MJ's sort of winner's edit, possibly, where, at maybe at the last minute, this is the juicy fire truth thing that Alan was talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what she betrays Phaedra.
Okay, okay. I'm sticking with Phaedra being banished, but from what I see on social media, I think the majority agree with you. I think most people seem to think Peter is going. In a matter of hours, we will know the answer. I
Yep.
will be sending you a message to discuss. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.